Hello, welcome to the Lions Awaken show. Glad to have you guys with us today. Thanks for joining us. Today is a third episode of a 4-part series we're doing called Caesar and God. Today we're going to talk about Romans 13 and what Paul meant by talking about it, because it seems that a lot of people don't actually know what it says today.
This is true.
And remember, if you like these videos, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can go on our website and sign up with your email on the bottom, hit the subscribe button, and we will send you all the latest podcasts and our writings to your inbox.
Convenience.
And, yes. Fill your inbox with some truth. We got a Facebook page, Instagram page. Check it out if you want to, and share if you like these videos to your friends. So, Caleb, why is it so important to talk about Romans 13 in this episode?
Well, it's very important to talk about this because we as Christians need to know the full context behind this scripture so we don't blindly and, I guess, unconditionally forfeit and submit our God-given rights and freedoms to the government when they have no right to take them away from us. So, yeah, that's why we need to talk about this.
Amen.
Especially this past year with the whole pandemic thing.
Yeah. People have used this scripture to justify submitting to the government.
That's
right.
right.
And we're going to see if that's actually what Paul meant.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Well, let's dive right into it, huh? Romans 13, 1-7. Verse 1 says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment."
Dang.
Wow. So by just looking at those two verses is basically saying every person that's in government and in authority is from God, and if you resist whatever they say, you're going to get the judgment of God on you.
For real. That's a bold thing to say, Paul.
Yeah.
Considering history.
Yeah. That's basically what it sounds like.
Yeah.
But is that actually what he means? I mean, he's basically making it sound like if somebody comes, if the government comes to your door and says, "Hey, we need to take your guns and you need to get vaccinated," you have no choice. You're just supposed to say,
submit.
They're there by God, so I got to listen to them.
Yep.
It's kind of what it sounds like, right?
Yeah, if you take just these verses at face value with no context, then you should submit to government unconditionally.
Yeah. But
no questions asked.
he doesn't end there.
He doesn't end there. Thank God he doesn't end there.
Amen.
Thank you, Paul, for continuing this chapter.
But wait, there's a scripture number 3.
That's right.
All right. Verse 3 says, "For the rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad." That's kind of changing the tone here.
That's changing the tone right there.
"Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good." Okay.
Is Paul contradicting himself in this verse, considering Nero was the emperor during his time? Because Nero was not a terror to bad conduct. He was a terror to good conduct.
Exactly.
So what is Paul saying here?
Because he's saying if you do what is good, you will receive his approval, which he's talking about the ruler, because the ruler is God's servant for your good. But
Nero didn't approve the Christians.
Exactly. He actually persecuted the Christians and killed them, and they were doing good.
And same with all the other governing authorities where Paul traveled all across the known world at the time. They persecuted him. They treated him bad. They stoned him. They tried to,
because he disobeyed the local authorities by preaching the gospel. So it's kind of like he's almost contradicting himself here.
Yeah.
Because he's saying rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. But they were a terror to him, and he was doing what was good in the sight of God. And if you would just take this as in meaning, if Paul would mean all rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad, then he'd be saying, well, Hitler is not a terror to good conduct, but to bad.
That's right. Stalin,
Mao who killed 100 million of his own people. So he's either lying or like there's more to this.
Yeah, there's more to this. Let's continue.
All right. It goes on. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is a servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. So there he kind of goes into, he's more talking about the position.
That's right.
Of what this governor, the person in governing authority, is supposed to do.
He's describing what government should be.
Right.
Not necessarily what government was during his time,
Mm-hmm.
or who was in authority during his time.
Exactly.
He's describing the positions of it. And in this particular verse, he's talking about the relationship between a good law-abiding citizen and a good government. If you're a good law-abiding citizen, don't be a criminal. So a good government can reward you by protecting your rights,
right,
and keeping you safe.
Yeah.
Paul's basically saying, don't be a criminal.
That's basically what he's saying. Yeah.
Don't be a criminal, and a good government will execute justice and will protect you.
Yeah. Because the person in government is an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Well, when you just look throughout history, there was a lot of rulers that did not carry out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. They actually carried out their own wrath on the Christians.
That's right. Satan's wrath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if Paul's just talking about submitting to authorities unconditionally, it doesn't make sense when you look throughout history.
Not at all.
Like it's obvious looking at the rest of the scriptures more than the first two.
The first two, that's right.
That he's talking about position of government, the position of the rulers, and what their job actually is, and that we're supposed to submit to good government,
That's
not
right.
bad. And in America and in Canada, the Constitution is the law of the land, not the people in government.
Mm-hmm.
The people in government are supposed to enforce the law of the land. So by us, let's take the logic that we're supposed to submit to government unconditionally or submit to the law of the land. Well, if we submit to the Constitution unconditionally, which is the law of the land, then we don't have to submit to the people in government if they
go against the law of the land.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
So we have to know what the law of the land is in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Here's some example of people in the Bible and history who did not submit to government unconditionally. We can look at Peter and John, Acts 4:19, where they were preaching the gospel, preaching about Jesus, and the governing authorities at that time, like the Pharisees and Sadducees, they arrested them and told them they can't preach the gospel anymore. And then Peter and John answered them and said, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you rather than God, you must judge. So there they were defying the local government and saying, no, we're going to obey God rather than you.
Yep.
So they disobeyed the local government.
That's right. Look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Exactly.
Prime example.
Yeah. They directly disobeyed the orders. They stood up and didn't kneel.
Yep.
And they were thrown in the furnace.
Daniel. I mean, even King David. King David violated Saul's law. I mean, he was the law of the land. So,
yeah.
But that's the thing. If you look at Scripture and you look at some of these, Bible characters that we esteem today, God couldn't have, well, he could have, but it would have been harder for God to display his glory and his miraculous supernatural signs if, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego or Daniel or King David didn't disobey the unjust bad government of their time.
Exactly. That's well said.
So,
I mean, look at Daniel in the lion's den.
That's right.
Like,
boom.
We would never have that story if Daniel would have obeyed the government and stopped praying.
Mm-hmm.
And Daniel kept on praying. Because of that, he had an encounter with an angel that gave him a bunch of prophecies about the end time. We wouldn't have those if he would have stopped praying.
That's right.
Look
at more modern type people in history, like Martin Luther.
It's a good example.
We'd all still be maybe Catholic today.
Yeah.
Catholic
were the governing authorities back in the day, right? And he directly disobeyed them and led kind of a revolution, spiritual revolution.
Yeah.
and changed the whole Christian
Well, he allowed
faith.
freedom, more freedom in the faith
Mm-hmm.
for more different denominations to arise. And then William Tyndale. I love William Tyndale.
Guy who printed the
English,
Bible.
English Bible, man.
Yep.
Come on now. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Martin Niemöller, World War II.
Who were those people?
Those guys were German pastors that defied Hitler. They stood up against him.
Dang.
I mean, they didn't submit to Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
If we take that verse and generalize it, saying we got to submit to all governing authorities unconditionally, I mean, then those guys died in vain. What those guys did was against God's law, I guess, by not submitting to Hitler.
Yeah.
You see how outrageous that sounds?
Yeah.
Like,
Doesn't make
no.
any sense.
Of course.
Why would you
those
submit
guys are
to
heroes.
Hitler?
Those guys are heroes.
Right. Because they stood up against him.
Yeah, exactly. Martin Luther King, same person. No one's gonna say, "Oh, he should have submitted to government." No, the guy, brought forth the civil rights movement and all that. Like that's awesome. Slavery in the South, same thing.
Because there was the segregation was the law of the land.
That's right.
And Martin Luther King stood up against that and confronted that, and changed it.
Yep.
Slavery in the South.
It keeps going on and on.
It's just on and on.
Yep. Nazi Germany, same thing.
It's just it seems so silly that we're just supposed to submit to evil people if they're in power. But but a lot of Christians today, they just this is the logic they use to just submit to the government.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to submit to the law of the land. So what do you say to those that say, well, the government I'm fine with the government coming and taking away or telling me I can't have a gun or whatever, but I can still preach the gospel. So it's different from the early church fathers preaching the gospel and the government coming and telling me I have to get vaccinated or they can take my guns. This is different. This is not violating my faith. So what do you have to say to those people? Does that make sense?
I mean, well, what's next though? Like if you give them that, what's stopping them from tomorrow asking for your faith? Like where's the line?
Right.
If you give, again, I love the quote, if you give the government an inch, they'll take a yard, they'll take a meter, they'll take a 1,000 feet. Like they'll take whatever they can get. It's in human nature to want power.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next? What's stopping them from taking if they can take your God-given right of self-defense away, what's stopping them from taking your God-given right of worshiping God away?
Exactly.
There's nothing stopping them.
Right.
Except for you and the people.
Which is why it's important to stand your ground in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We can look at Jesus, right? Did he submit to authority unconditionally?
Absolutely not.
I mean, he got killed because he rebelled against the local government.
Yep.
Because he spoke truth. And they crucified him.
That's right.
America would have never been birthed if they would have just stayed submitted to King George.
That's right.
We
And
live
then
in this beautiful country.
Pastors today who preach Romans 13, we have to submit to government, they do so freely because the founders did the opposite. So it's funny how they're basically biting the hand that fed them.
Yeah. What you're saying is the founders paid the price for them to even be able to say this stuff freely without being persecuted.
Yeah.
Exactly. With this all being said, when do we draw the line to know when to submit to authority and when not to submit to authority?
Okay, so there's two laws in play here. There's the law of man, which can be subjective, it can be relative, it can be more flowy. Then there's the moral law of God, which is absolute, and it's the highest standard. It's objective. Whenever the law of man violates the law of God, that is when we, the church and Christians, do not have to submit to the law of man. The law of man becomes invalid. We don't have to follow it because we follow the moral law. It's higher. We follow God's law.
It's eternal.
Exactly, it's eternal. And the moral law, that encompasses our God-given rights and freedoms. Freedom of speech, freedom to expression and faith and all that stuff, freedom to defend ourselves, all that encompasses the moral law. And so, and this applies even during a pandemic. This applies
No
across
matter
the board,
what.
no matter what.
These are unalienable
is
rights
exactly.
which nobody can take away from us.
No matter the situation.
Right.
And so we need to know this.
Yeah. So, and the first step to do that is to know what
your rights
are.
That's right.
So read the Declaration of Independence and
Yep.
the Constitution so you know what rights God has given you and that were established in this country.
And stay tuned for our series after this series about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
Teaser.
That's
Sorry.
right. But most of all, read the Bible so you know what God's moral law is.
That's right.
So you know what is right and what is
Mhm.
wrong.
Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. If
Exactly.
there's no freedom, you know the Spirit of the Lord is not there. Like, honestly,
That's so true.
that's it.
I just want to clarify what we're talking about here is not rising up in an unrighteous rebellion that will end up in anarchy like BLM and Antifa is doing these days.
For real.
And destroying property, creating more chaos,
Mhm.
confusion. It's not bringing any unity or change.
Yeah.
It's just destroying it. But what we're talking about is standing up and preserving the foundations that this country was built upon, that the
Mhm.
West was built upon. It was built on the principles of the Bible,
That's right.
and we're talking about preserving our God-given rights to not let the government take that away. When they come against that, we need to stand up and fight back against that. And we're
Mhm.
not talking about reinstituting a whole new government.
That's right.
We're just talking about bringing it back, defending our foundation.
That's right.
Which is what, I mean, it's kind of what the founding fathers did when they signed the Declaration of Independence. They had a long-term plan. It was like a righteous rebellion. They were like, hey, you're violating our God-given rights. There they actually had to throw off a new government and institute a new one.
Mm-hmm.
But today, we just want to bring it back to the foundations that they set for us.
Yep.
So hopefully that makes sense.
Yep.
All right, so in conclusion, take it away, Caleb.
All right. So to summarize all that has been said, tie a nice little bow around it. No man or government has the right to take away that which is God-given. Period. They defend and protect.
Yep.
They don't give or take away.
Yep.
And we as Christians in churches, we are not obligated to submit to bad government. It says nowhere in the Bible to submit to bad government. If it does, comment and prove us
Please
wrong.
let us know.
Prove us wrong.
Exactly.
I'm open. If
Yeah.
I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong.
Yep.
And so, yeah, whenever man breaks God's moral law, then their law, government's law, becomes invalid to follow.
There you have it, folks. That sums
Boom.
it up.
That's all she wrote.
Yep. So now hopefully you can be confident and courageous to stand up for your rights and not just give in to whatever the government tells you. And stay tuned for our next episode where we're going to be talking about the separation of church and state
Ooh.
and the lies about that. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.